Hello and welcome to the Beyond podcast and episode 3 of the fantasy production meeting, where we build the productions we want to see as a down payment to the future. We are...
I'm Liza in London, and I like to leer at lemon drizzle cake.
I'm Robert in Lavenham, and I like to leer at jets.
My name is Alexandra, and I'm surrounded by homophones.
And we are the fantasy production team, and this is our meeting today. We are looking at the true chronicle history of King Lear and his 3 daughters, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia. It's from the repertoire of the Queen's Men and dated to somewhere around the 1590s, but Dating and Company, they don't worry us here. We don't care. We're only interested in how we might want to produce this play today. If you're inspired by our ideas, if you would like to keep us in cheese, then you can support our work generally on Patreon, patreon.com/Beyond Shakespeare, where you can hear the uncut version of this episode early. You can watch the video version, you can hear all the audio feed, you can get all the stuff. There's been some quality content in this session before we actually went officially live, so there is some stuff you just don't want to miss out on, or maybe want to never talk about ever again, depending on how much you pledge, of course. There's a host of other patron-only content also available, and early access stuff available too. But that's enough of that. All this official stuff. Let's get down to business. We've got productions to build. So, let's talk about King Lear.
But Rob, what's the play about?
I'm glad you asked that question, Liza. Now, if you're a subscriber to our YouTube channel, you might have seen that we've done 2 read-throughs of this play, one which featured some acting. That was the second-looked version. But for those who haven't seen either our first or second-look readings, here is a brief recap of the action.
King Lear? What's it all about?
King Lear wants to split his kingdom and has a cunning plan to do so, involving a little Who Loves Me Best game that he plays with his daughters. Unfortunately, he tells some of his counsellors, and one of them...
Scaliger!
leaks the plan to Lear's elder daughters, Goneril and Ronald Regan, who plot to... Something went wrong there. Goneril and Regan, who plot to make sure the youngest daughter, Cordelia, looks like a total arse during that scene. Which happens, and Cordelia is banished by Lear. Luckily, she encounters on the road the...
In disguise!
King of France, and they fall in love and marry.
Meanwhile,
King Lear has been chucked out by his 2 daughters and is starving on the road with his trusty friend Perillus. His 2 daughters hire a messenger,
Who has no name.
to kill them. But luckily, thunder from the heavens scares him away, and Lear escapes to France, where he is reunited with Cordelia, and they invade and chase away the 2 bad daughters.
and they all live happily ever after.
The end. So, that's vaguely it. There's lots of other stuff going on, which we will talk about, hopefully, as we go through our planned productions. It's a bit of a fairy tale, it's sort of a history play, it's got drama, it's got comedy, it's got a happy ending, it's occasionally very, very rude, and one of the best parts doesn't even get a name. Basically, I love this play. But how to produce it? So let's go to the fantasy production meeting whiteboard and crack on. So, the first question is... Which budget, venue, media, where are we going to be putting this production? Where are we going with this? So, I'm going to go around the room. I'm going to look for high concepts or low concepts. What is your production going to be in a nutshell? Liza, I'll start with you. Tell us, what kind of production are you thinking of for King Lear?
Well, this play, when you think about it, is surprisingly versatile. You could do it in a low-budget way, in a high-budget way. You could do it outdoors. You could do it in an enclosed space, as might have been done in a theater in a yard at the time. After lockdown, I'm kind of feeling allergic to proscenium arches, so that mode wouldn't necessarily be my priority. I like theater when it has immediacy, and this sort of theater is written to be brought to people. The one idea I can't rid myself of, And this probably would require a budget, at least in terms of cleaning. And also, whoever was doing wardrobe would want to have my head, possibly justifiably. The idea I can't rid myself of is a stage covered with sand. So that, various characters could disturb the sand, or could build sandcastles, or could sit down with a bucket and spade, or could, characters could be buried, and, again, getting the sand out of everyone's costume at the end of every night would be a whole thing. I'm thinking of a wide, empty space, just stage covered with sand and maybe a projected background, or maybe just a backlit psych. The focus would be on the human drama, on the drama between people, because this is ultimately a family story, and a story about humans and what it means to be human.
Well, you say a story about humans. We could always go down the animal route. There's always those options. I'm not suggesting it has to be an animated thing involving lots of cute animals,
But it does sound that that's what you're suggesting. Is that what you're suggesting?
I am actually not suggesting that, but I'm not. I'm just saying we shouldn't not. So now, Liza, are you wedded to sand? Would you go for beaten earth or other materials?
Well,
I'm
earth
just trying
would
to suggest something that's even worse for a stage management perspective.
I mean, earth would be even harder to clean than sand. I recall seeing a production at, oh God, the Barbican, where the stage, for quite a while, the stage was covered with theatrical dirt, which was made of, I think, ground up rubber. But it's still going to leave a mark if you kneel on it and skid a bit in your costume. And whereas sand, at least, can be harmlessly shaken off. That's my pitch for sand.
Especially out of your eyes, yes.
Yeah, that
there
makes fight scenes bad.
Health
yeah.
and safety. Yeah.
There are several options for supposedly Earth, for staging Earth, and they have different problems. But I can testify to having fight scenes in sand. It's horrific, and therefore good luck with that.
That is not to say we shouldn't do it, and I'm liking the image. I'm loving that vista, that shape of the stage, that you can differentiate with a material like that.
How do you feel about an outdoor performance on sand, such as, for instance, on a beach or such like?
That idea really intrigues me. That some of the most memorable scenes of the play could take place on a beach, and
or
I
quarry,
guess
or similar.
or
Sand type stuff is available.
Yes,
But I know there
quarries
is a
tend.
scene where they actually say, "Let us go and look at the sea for a bit."
Yes, and quarries tend to have gravel and fall. At least I take your point about fight scenes, Alexandra, but falling on sand is way easier than falling on gravel.
This is true.
And strangely enough, your point made me think there aren't actually that many fights
I
in
was
this
about
play.
to point that point out, is that actually you can do this with a little bit of chasing and no fighting.
Yeah.
You can do this play with no violence at all.
Yeah, but a certain amount of nudity, which is required.
Yeah, that brings up a whole new raft of sand problems.
Anyway, we've got a sense, a theatrical production, lots of sand, maybe some projection. We will come back to Liza in a moment. Alexandra, do you have a vision?
So I was thinking of something that follows on perfectly from Liza's suggestion of something fun and outdoorsy and kind of pretty, because my production is very grim. I was reading the play again last night, and it struck me how much of it is very domestic. It's supposed to be about a kingdom and about this great international conflict, as it were. You've got the King of Gallia invading Britain to restore it to its rightful king, etc. But what it all boils down to is an elderly person sort of handing over inheritance before they are dead, and then expecting to be sustained, supported in comfort by their children, and that going very poorly for them. And I think there are lots of aspects of the play that would resonate very strongly with people nowadays, or could be made to sound very familiar without any change to the text, without a lot of effort. One of the things that I noticed as well that I found very interesting is that there are claims in opposition. And it's very easy to sort of think, oh, well, clearly the daughters are lying and Leah is telling the truth. But I find it more interesting if what you have is an intergenerational conflict where each party really does feel like they are being wronged by the other party for the reasons that they espouse. And again, I think that would make it, without changing anything in how the play is written, or just by performing those things, you could bring out some complexities that people nowadays would, I think, find a lot of resonance with. So my production, sort of taking advantage of or leaning into all of those, would be modern dress, domestic setting, maybe the kingdom is the name of the shop that they own as a family or something like that. So it's brought back right down. The visuals I have in mind at the moment are very made for TV, sort of low budget production. I feel as though that would be a better opportunity for visual representation than staging it on actual stage might be.
So you're thinking more a TV video format rather than a live theatre thing. Okay, where am I placed? Well, I'm placed. I don't think I've done this yet for these production meetings. I'm actually going to go to the medium we are speaking on. I haven't been championing podcasts or audio at all, and I do actually think that with a few bits of adaptation, this play works really well. I do find that this is one of those plays that actually could land in all of the camps actually quite nicely. It doesn't present itself. It does have some visual moments, but they're not necessarily vital, and they can perhaps slip to one side. So there is a scene in the middle of the play where there's an awful lot of prop business that goes on involving books and daggers and stuff, which is not necessarily hugely important. But what is important in that scene is the thunder from the heavens and the gods. And, so the thing that about that scene leans towards in my mind is, sound design, thunder and lightning. That is really exciting. We've got some lovely, quite intense scenes that are very conversational, but also really quite potentially messed up and twisted. And also there's certain bits of the text which on a stage or potentially on film lean towards comedy perhaps too much. So there's the well-known kneeling scene towards the end of the play, which, as it has been staged, or at least in read-throughs, it tends to lean towards comedy because it's kneel, stand up, kneel, stand up, kneel, stand up. And on audio, actually, I think my aesthetic is leaning into that fairy tale aspect to it. Where this is, it's a true chronicle history, a true chronicle written by someone who made it up. We know it isn't true. The original people of this production probably did not know that. They might have had an inkling. People were starting to twig that the stuff Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote was not necessarily based on anything other than his idea of telling some interesting stories. So, leaning into that idea, because this play does dance around a lot between comedy and drama and slightly disturbing things. But then towards the end of the play, we've got action and adventure, but you don't see any of it in the play. So again, renders itself well to sound design because we have these, in theory, battle scenes or action scenes where actually all you need to know basically is that one side wins and one side loses, and actually the sound design element for that can be really quite engaging and exciting and actually paints perhaps a better picture than either a theatre or a stage show can do. That at the moment is where I'm sort of leaning. I did lean almost towards film because of what I might say in the next question. But just finally to say, of course, the great thing about recording on audio is, of course, further down the line, I could always commission someone to animate some furry animals to play all those parts to go with the sound. So I can have the best of both worlds there. And any thoughts on each other's ideas? We have managed by complete accident, because we didn't actually have a proper prep before this, to land on different mediums. So that's nice.
Don't let everybody know.
Yes, we prepared all. This is all scripted. Yes.
Not just pulling it out of our you-know-what as per usual.
Yeah, well, we've been doing an awful lot of early Tudor drama, and pulling things out of you-know-what is basically the whole history of comedy until about 1574. Yeah, any thoughts on our respective shows? We've got a nice clear aesthetic from Liza. I obviously don't have. I have a sound aesthetic. If that is a thing.
It's a very clear aesthetic on yours as well. It's an absent one, but a very clear one. I do actually. I very much like the idea of resolving some of the scenes that might be problematic through the use of sound instead. And I think even the scene that you mentioned, Rob, that is the one with lots of business and potentially an attempted murder, is, I think that you could make that clearer with sound, rather than sort of it be a struggle because we can't see what's happening. Because there are also in the dialogue, in a lot of places in the play, not just in that scene, there are quite clear repetitions of what has happened in speech, so that we make sure that everybody knows, Yeah.
Yes,
And
King Lear has this massive speech towards the end of just going, and here is the story so far, which on stage feels a bit excessive, but maybe in this kind of context actually is a useful recap.
I like that speech very much, because it means we get his perspective on what happened, and we get his changed perspective on his own actions. So it's not just plot exposition, it's character exposition as well. I would definitely be keen to see how that speech worked on stage in context.
Excellent. We move on a little bit because we're going to dive into the characters, and this is a play with lots and lots of really fantastic characters that we have to be careful not to get too effusive on. So are there any major characters you'd like to talk about that may be very central to your production? Are there any bits of fantasy casting? Do you have anyone in your mind that might work with any of these parts? The ground rules are, as usual, you're only allowed one Muppet. But I'll go to Alexandra first. Are there any characters that leap out to you that you want to really flag up, or relationship between characters or things?
Yeah, so there is one aspect of the way in which this play is structurally built that relies on duality in characters. So we have, from the very first scene, we have the supportive nobleman and the nobleman that goes and reveals Lear's secrets to his daughters. We have a duality between how the daughters behave. We have a king of Cornwall and a king of Cambria. We have, this sort of division into twos or threes. So my interest in casting, and indeed in the creating of the production of the performances, would be very much to lean into that duality and the contrast between the two. And the only other thought I've had in terms of a general aspect of the casting is I would want it to be very diverse group set in a very diverse place. So, if you're setting this, it doesn't have to be London specifically, but if you set it in an urban environment with a variety of local communities and a variety of faces and voices on the screen, I think, again, this is not purely an ancient white people's story. And I would really want that the play to bring that across.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's not a play with actually a huge number of characters. I've been looking at the doubling, going, what's the minimum I could do if I was doing a theatre show more than another kind of show? Of how far could I go for extreme doubling? And you can get it almost down to about 8 or 9. You'd have to really turn on a sixpence. So in that sense, it's nice to actually be able to go through and think about the kinds of voices that we've got, because it's not a ridiculous number of voices that I need to worry about. So when you're doing audio, you're always worrying about people sounding too samey as other people. And that's where diversity comes in really nicely, because, of course, if you have people with different accents, different modes of speech, immediately tell you, this is a different person to the other person. This is the problem with, having everyone doing RP is terrible, because then they all sound the same.
And if I may add, it's in the script. They are the kings of Cornwall, Gallia, which is France, and Cambria, which is Wales. So already it's setting you distant sounding or different sounding voices.
And it really works really nicely for that. I mean, I have to say, in my mind, the fantasy casting that I've got is actually a bit too visual, because the people I immediately think of, so King Lear and Perillus is such a lovely double act. I love them as they are both a bit sweet and comedic, but also there is something really very solid there as their relationship. So I keep seeing them as one of the combination of characters, and this is a very UK reference, so I apologise for our international listeners, but it's very Last of the Summer Wine. I expect one of them to be Peter. They're all the people I could name are unfortunately not with us anymore, but very Peter Sallis kind of thing. I expect Lear and Perillus to be coming down a hill in a bathtub. That is what I have sort of visually in my mind. I don't know actually whether that's the sound or the voice that I actually want.
Well, the beauty of audio drama is that you can have people coming down the hill in a bathtub.
Yeah, and they'd never know. That's how we'd record it. Because we've also got, I think there's where it can get a bit meaty as well with the performance of it for audio, as I would actually say to people, lean into the perhaps going a bit against where Alexandra is going with her interpretation, is that the evil people are quite evil, and we can't. I wouldn't go full pantomime, but there is that direction. When I was reading The Messenger, and it went really quite sadomasochisty, there's a sort of lean into that, and Scaligor, who's this sort of nicely worm-like figure who sadly disappears very early in the play. That's one of the few disappointing elements. And there's a lot of potential for close mic work, especially some of Reagan's speeches, and that difference between public speaking and close voice speaking, because there's so much potential there.
I feel like you can do that a lot more convincingly in an audio-only production, really push into the fantasy or the fairy tale nature of it, as you were saying earlier, in a vocal sense, without it sounding ridiculous. It's sounding exaggerated, but not ridiculous.
Yeah, it's stylized. It's not. It doesn't mean it doesn't have depth to it, because even some of the more. And I'm doing air quotes here. That it's great on audio. When I'm talking about evil people, because they're not necessarily that black and white in that sense at all. And it's one of the few times also where I'm really keen to get some really good music recorded for this kind. Some audio productions I do, I lean very heavily away from using music. There's this one I actually feel that I'd like to really spend a bit of time and money getting a really good score for this, because I think it would lend to bits of it very nicely. Liza, any thoughts on characters?
In this context, you really have to mention Mumford.
Yes.
Because in the Disney film tradition of serious characters with funny sidekicks, Mumford is the Sebastian the Crab, Mumford is the teeny little dragon, Mumford is Bartok the Bat from Anastasia. He's...
For the listeners, because we didn't touch on Mumford is basically the sidekick to the French king, who marries Cordella and does all the things that Liza's just described.
Mumford does not marry Cordella. The French king does marry Cordella.
The French, yes, sorry.
However, Mumford has an entire backstory and situation going on where he's found a nice girl over in Britain and he's had to go back to France and he wants to return to her, and then when they come back with the invasion, he acts very heroically and he basically saves the day single-handedly, and he's so very much the hero of a different story, this man.
Perhaps, in true Muppet tradition, we should call him the Amazing Mumford. I would be tempted to cast... I mean, this is a huge feat of memory, so it's probably more of a fantasy than anything else. But I would be tempted to cast a pair of actors as Lear and Perillus and just not decide who was going to play who until like the third week of rehearsal, or have them swap, have them understudy each other. I think whoever I asked to play Lear, I would also ask them to either sit in on the auditions for Perillus or choose their own Perillus. Lucian M. Zamati keeps recurring to me. I saw him play Salieri in Amadeus at the National, and at that moment, I yearned to see him do something early modern, and either as Lear or as Perillus. I'd probably offer him both and see which one he wanted, and then give him the option to choose his stage partner. Because Perillus is Lear's stage partner, and their love is not romantic. But part of this play is about desperation, destitution, and the friends who stay with you in that circumstance. You need that very particular relationship between those two actors. Whether they met at the start of rehearsal or years ago, you need people who get on, fundamentally. The daughters are a whole nother question.
We haven't really talked about the daughters at all, have we?
We haven't really talked about the characters much.
There's Indira Varma, there's Fiona Shaw, there's, for Regan, I don't know, I mean, I'm an opera singer by background, and Regan strikes me as a very, very operatic soprano sort of role. You need someone who can be both glamorous and murderous. And Cordelia, I would hold open auditions. I would want to discover a Cordelia. Likewise, the King of Gallia, I'd want to discover him. You'd probably have to cast an established comedy person as Mumford, someone who would be at home wearing the enormous trousers that Mumford canonically wears. I do dearly hope we're going to talk about clothing and costume in this play at some point, because it's such a huge thing.
I think we can squeeze that into one of the questions coming up, but we are going to take a mini break now. Hello, Sarah.
Hello.
So we have now reached the portion of the podcast where we move away from the serious engagement with the play for something a little more playful with this particular text, as we're going to now go over to Cocktail Minute, where Sarah has specially curated a cocktail specifically for this play to embody some element of that play and deliver it to your taste buds and your liver direct. So, without further ado, over to Sarah and Cocktail Minute.
Legal disclaimer.
We accept no liability as to how this drink affects your internal organs or views on the nature of reality.
All recipes are followed at the listener's own risk. Don't have nightmares.
And now, over to Sarah and Cocktail Minute.
Good evening, darlings. Or good afternoon. I don't judge. Today I am making a cocktail that's inspired by King Lear, and specifically it's inspired by Regan. Now, she is one of those people who appears to be lovely and sweet and happy and good for you on the surface, but my goodness me, does she pack a punch. Specifically, later on in the play, she actually slaps one of the ambassadors around the face and calls him a saucy mate. So this cocktail is called the Saucy Mate in honour of Regan, and I'm going to show you how to make it. So, to begin, you are going to need 25 mils of dark or medium rum. Doesn't matter which, but you don't want anything too light. You don't want like light rum, you want a nice golden rum. And you add that to your cocktail shaker, and then you add 30 mils of toffee vodka. Now, there are different ones on the market and they all taste slightly different, but just whatever you can find, basically. Just sling that in. Put that into your cocktail shaker. Then you want 8 mils of Calvados. Now, folks, I do mean 8 mils, not 10, not 15. If you put 15 mils of Calvados into this, it's going to blow your head off. So just a really small amount, 8 mils, no more, no less. Pop that into your cocktail shaker, and then the final secret ingredients is take a bar spoon and add to your cocktail shaker 3 spoonfuls of apple sauce. Yes, the Saucy Mate does actually contain sauce. Now, this is an apple puree, which means it's pure apple, there's no sugar added. And that is kind of really what you want. You don't want like condiment type apple sauce that's got tons of sugar in it, because if you use that, then it'll be really sweet, especially in combination with toffee vodka. So a nice pure apple, unless you really like sweet stuff, in which case, go for it. So once you've added all that to your cocktail shaker, you give it a mix. Then strain it through your shaker into a martini glass, and you will end up with something that looks like this. Here's what I made earlier. Now, you can see it kind of looks a bit like a smoothie. Looks quite healthy, quite good for you. You take a sip. And it tastes quite lovely. It's kind of appley. Yeah, again, it tastes like it's going to be quite good for you. And then, the Calvados kicks in and literally smacks you around the face, just like Reagan does the ambassador. So that is the Saucy Mate, and cheers.
Soupy Twist. A full ingredients and instruction list should be available via the show notes. I say should, I don't know if it will. So we go to our next question, and this is much more about rehearsal process. We're talking about what we might do with the script, but other production issues that we might want to bring in play. You know, we've mentioned set before, but we've got room to talk about the kind of commissioning that you might want to be doing in terms of stagecraft, costuming, lighting, any of the more pragmatic things that might go into this sort of little sessionette now. So I'm up first in terms of rehearsal process. I don't think there's much to say in terms of the way it would work. But I think in terms of script, there's a really interesting question here, because the play has great scenes. It's got lots of really wonderful scenes, but they're really interesting lengths. You get about halfway through the play and suddenly you get these big scenes, and not necessarily the best shape for audio. There is a convention that you don't necessarily want to have long scenes in audio drama. You want to chop them up a bit. So there might be some dramaturgical changes where we move some bits around and break things up. And it may just simply be that that's where trims come in. It's not an excessively long play. As an audio drama, I'd probably release it in more than one episode, probably two. But maybe look to see whether a 3-part structure works better. So again, there might be some moving around, there might even be some repetitions, there might be some introductory narration. I don't want to add a narrator generally because I don't think it needs it, and I generally avoid it where possible. Alexandra, do you have any other thoughts about rehearsal process, script changes, how you would produce this?
Yes, so it sort of relates to our earlier point about casting, in that I would want to find, I think it doesn't matter to me how well known, because it's a fantasy, so, there will obviously be an audience. It doesn't matter to me how well known the actors are. I would like them to be very naturalistic. So I don't necessarily want people who would be awesome at the classical stuff. I'd want people who would give us that contemporary resonance. And part of that would also be in the visuals, in the way in which this is produced, and in the slight adjustment to the contemporary world, which must needs be made in order to give reason for one of the issues, or one of the plot points being about delayed letters. Because if you set it in a contemporary times, how exactly are these messengers essential, and why not just text the person? So going therefore with the uncut text would present a lot of problems. Cutting bits would cause other kinds of problems, in that I'd have to be cutting plot. So I wonder whether adapting in some means or another, or doing something similar to what you were suggesting, Rob, which is setting up a thing which could be narrated, could be written on the screen, could be sort of inserted somehow. Setting something up at the beginning that establishes this as this world, but not exactly, in order to facilitate such things as that. And also the other bit of difficulty that I'm currently having with my imaginary production, which is a military invasion. Now, my view on that is that it can be adapted. As I was saying earlier, you could do this play without any of the violence on screen, but you still need an understanding of theoretically what kind of violence that would have been. And if you go for a very small scale, as I said, domestic, corner shop type situation instead of a kingdom, then actually that helps with that problem for me, because you can construct that as just that violence breaks out, as opposed to it becoming a massive, gathers an army and comes across the sea. But as I say, that would require some scriptorial adaptation.
I mean, it's one of the things I didn't say about my adaptation, which is slightly harder for my medium, which is dealing with the sort of disappearance of Cordelia while the fighting starts, and which we felt when we were looking at it. It felt like she should be there, she should be with the armies and things, and actually the disappearance of the daughters generally towards the end of the play, which is probably for pragmatic reasons in the original production, but is a little disappointing. It's slightly harder for me to substitute things because it's working with text that mostly needs to be with X or Y, that I could throw a few bits in, whereas stage production might be able to balance that out simply by presence and additional action and the odd bit of dialogue being nicked. Liza, your live stage show, what would you be doing that? What elements are you thinking of?
Well, I think the point Alexandra brought up about a French invasion of Britain, and that is one of the genius strokes of this play, that they take a French invasion of Britain, which plot-wise and character-wise is absolutely portrayed as a good thing, and they do the only thing you can do with it that's not going to enrage the audience and make the Master of Revels censor it, which is play it for comedy. No one actually dies in this invasion.
They just get naked.
Well, also potentially fun, yes. The French king has a pre-battle speech, and then Mumford has one immediately afterwards that sends it up, which is great, full of puns. Then you get your early modern staple, your drunk, incompetent watch persons whose job it is to fire the beacon if they see anything dangerous, and they're more interested in sitting down in front of a fire and having some bacon than firing the beacon.
Boom.
Look, it was funny in 15 whatever. And
I think it's still funny now, actually. I
It
actually
is.
thought that line landed.
that scene works really well. And now the interesting thing about the nudity, which Rob brought up, the stage direction for the fight, that's after the captains have told the watch people to watch the beacon. The watch people have said, let's go to the tavern and watch some bacon instead. Then the French invasion happens, and the stage direction says, alarum with men and women half naked. This invasion has come upon this town in the evening when people are getting undressed and they're running around, coming out of their houses and running around on stage going, oh no! But the interesting thing is, in a lot of these early modern plays, you don't get terribly specific stage directions. And this play's stage directions are really specific about costume often and about what people wear. So the stage direction that starts with alarum with men and women half naked continues, enter two captains without doublets, with swords. A doublet at the time was a padded garment which might have also been reinforced at times with metal plates in places. There was a padded garment that you would wear if you thought there was going to be any fighting. It might have metal plates in it. It wasn't necessarily armor as such, but if it would stop you from getting bruised, and it might stop an edge from coming through to you.
And there are so many double acts in this play. I mean, it's not just in the big characters, but also in these small scenes as well, that there's just these little two-handers constantly being delivered, which is, again, really quite nice for my medium. Sorry, I'm interrupting you, Liza.
For someone directing this play, you can get a lot of directions, a lot of help for the director from the stage directions. There's also the scene where, again, it's very much in contrast. It's sort of a kindness of strangers scene, even though the strangers behave really selfishly. The scene where Lear and Perillus have to pay for their passage on a ship by giving their nice garments to the sailors, because their money has been taken. They don't have any money, so they have to take off their outer garments, not all their garments. That would just be too much nudity.
But it does build in that direction, because they take off their cloaks. They negotiate which of them shall give away their cloak. Well, they try to negotiate, and eventually they both lose their cloaks. And then later on, they offer their doublets, which I thought was just jacket. But yes, so they start off being fully accoutred in regal and respectively high noblemen wear. And then as they go further and further along their journey, they keep giving away their caps as well, I think, to the mariners. They keep giving away bits of their valuable clothing.
Yeah, and the mariners, like, they don't wait for them to offer. The mariners just say, oh, here's a good gown, I would look passing well in it. Significant pause. And the mariners are also very specific about the gowns, about the garments they give away in exchange. They say, do you hear, sir, you look like an honest man. Here's a good strong motley gabardine, cost me 14 good shillings at Billingsgate. And motley was a fabric that was woven together from the ends of different colors of yarn. It was a way of using up the ends of yarn after you'd finished weaving whatever you were going to weave with it. So it was a fabric with different colors woven into it. And this second mariner says, here's a good sheep's russet sea gown. And, russet was a cheap dye. It was a color that, according to sumptuary laws, it was a color that rustic people and lower class people could wear freely. And they also keep debating whose gown is better than whose, both of the gowns they give away and the gowns that they get. And poor Perillus, he tries so hard to get Lear his gown back. It's part of the whole friendship and self-sacrifice thing, and also you could see, a king looking sort of faintly ridiculous in this gown and sea cap. That, they were built to keep out water. Maybe they're actually better off than in their velvets and brocades. But this play does really, really interesting things with costume and appearance. There's also a reference to Mumford having very large trousers, which is in line with other plays that refer to their clowns as having very, very large trousers that they can conceal a multitude of props in.
So for your production at the moment, I'm getting this vista of sand and then extremely detailed costuming coming into essentially this not a blank space, but that's where the money's going. It's
where a lot of the visual interest is the people. And no matter what the period, no matter what the concept, this play is so specific about what people wear and how people look. I feel like any production has to take that up.
Although it does very much lend itself, that language lends itself very well to the not radio, the sound audio only production that Rob is envisaging, because you don't need to illustrate anything for the audience. It's in the text. It's there for their imagination. And yes, I think it's one of those things that for my production, if you set it in yesterday AD in terms of timing, then you would either have to adjust these lines to words that mean things now, or just find a visual parallel so that you're going. But what I mean by this rustic, what was it? Russet sheep's skin something. It's having to sort of be very illustrative with that, or cutting that beautiful, beautiful costume-related language, and just making the visuals in general be, tell the story.
All of those details can be. You can find analogues for those and fudge them. It has been done.
For audio, I think it might actually help for people to describe what they're wearing. It might be an aid to imagination.
And now a little interlude as we enter the chat room. Enter the chat room. We've already looked at this wonderful play twice on YouTube in our various exploring sessions, where we use the chat room to enter into the deeper world of the play and look for the more intellectual aspects that we can share and celebrate with you now. And so, as we enter the chat room, we're going to find out what the deepest and most intelligent thinkers of the world think about this play as they read it. So now, join us as we enter the chat room.
It's cannibalism again.
What's with all the eating of people?
Why can't I spell?
Glasses.
The Purplist.
LOL, what a shit flinger he is.
I do so love this whole premeditation plot.
Cut to the noble camera.
It's so fun to be evil.
Hat!
I love it when Rob begs.
Is it me? Or is this a little rude?
You dirty bugger.
She had a sword.
Good slap action!
Yes!
Now I want to chip Butty.
And that was the important message from the chat room. I'm sure that was very helpful for all of you at home.
I'm also sure that a lot of you would now like a chip buddy.
Chips. We'll now leave the chat room and return you to your regular content. Okay, we're going into our final sequence of things. A bit more of a free-for-all here as we're asking for our favourite things, favourite lines, favourite speeches, favourite scenes, favourite characters, and I don't know who. There are just so many. I know this is because I was in it, but The Messenger, I just absolutely love The Messenger. This is a character who doesn't get a name, and yet is a really quite substantial, chunky part. And the way he interacts with both sisters is he sort of plays them against each other to gain himself more money. And just performing it, I did it all on the hoof, it just became really quite, spank me, mistress, spank me. In a sort of slightly weird way. I don't think that's necessarily how the part has to go. But yeah, I have a great fondness for The Messenger. I think The Messenger is fab.
I can recommend to anyone listening to this that you go and watch Rob's performance as the Messenger. It is all that and a chip buddy. I would be very hard put to cast anyone else having seen Rob do that. Other favorite characters?
Or scenes, or speeches, or stuff.
You know, there are so many fun moments in this play, and so many moments that really shouldn't work but somehow do. Like the sit down, stand up, sit down, kneel down, fight, fight, fight scene. The scene where, for example, Lear and Perillus try and convince the Messenger not to kill them, which he's been sent to do by the daughters. And the Messenger sort of has a conscience, but also sort of doesn't. And it's just a really lovely scene with very human reactions from everyone.
I love the things that you have both pointed out, but I'm looking at it from a structural standpoint, which is that characters have journey, and they change in interesting ways, and in ways that hopefully can be surprising to us as an audience, or if not surprises, at least sort of satisfying as evolution. So I really love that scene in which the messenger, who has been persuaded by one of the sisters to go and try and kill Lear and Perillus, is then faced with, he says to Lear, your children have made this happen. Your children are the ones who sent me. And Lear responds, oh, you're coming from France, because he suspects that to be Cordella's doing. And so this tiny moment of, hang on a second, what? That then leads to the messenger's entire unraveling or evolution as a character, and the way in which that's constructed, that's scripted in that scene, I really, really love. I also love the extent to which Goneril and Regan plot, but not just sort of for the evils. There is logic behind what they do and behind how they arrange things to happen, and then we follow that logic play out. They have a lot of agency in their worlds, and I really love that. And I also like the characters like Scaliger, for example, who is a nobleman in Lear's court, who then becomes a follower of, I think, Goneril's. So he changes. The ambassador from Gaul turns up in 2 scenes, and yet there is evolution in what happens to him. So, and also Mumford.
I think maybe my favorite speech in it is Regan's last speech, where she talks, or her last soliloquy, where she talks about how it starts off in a sort of smash the patriarchy way, where she talks about how frustrated she is with men who can't even get any murdering done. Like, all she wants is some murder, and can't any of these useless men just...
I mean, it's such a fabulous speech.
Yes, and how interesting that Regan refers to being out of charity with all the heartless men in Christendom. Now, usually when you hear heartless, it means that they're without pity or without mercy or without feeling of humanity. Regan doesn't mean that. She means that they lack the heart to actually do a murder when they're asked to. She's using it in the sense of lacking courage, which in her world is just, murder who you're told to murder already.
To illustrate Liza's point precisely, the lines after are "A pox upon them when they are afraid to give a stab or slit a paltry windpipe, which are so easy matters to be done."
That's what I really love about using this in a sort of inspirational wall chart poster kind of way. You take it out of context and it becomes something much more inspirational. You put the next line in and you suddenly go, "Oh no, people, they're just crap at murdering."
I'd almost like that to be the other side of the mug.
Oh, now that's a good idea. Oh, right. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
But then, would you accept a drink out of the mug if someone gave it to you?
Depends who you are. I might not. Oh, lovely. Okay, yeah, I've noted that down. That's what the merchandise for this one will be, and we are looking to do merchandise for this this show, as we do for all our shows, so that you can, or these hypothetical shows, so that you can donate. If you want to donate to us, you can obviously be a patron. You can donate something to us via Ko-fi. But if you'd like to donate specifically for us to do things with this play, then there is not only a PayPal link that is in the show notes, but there is also there should be a bit of merchandise that you can also buy, which will go directly into funds for this. And depending on how much comes in, we might do just something very small and simple that just helps promote it. It might be enough to do a workshop. It might be enough to do, something close to a full production, or at least contribute to it. I can't guarantee the scale of the thing that your money would go to, but it would go to something King Lear, the true chronicle history thereof. Any other, briefly, before we go into our final thing, any other brief favourite things? I'm just going to say the watch. I just like the watch. And the naked people. Because they're comedy naked. They don't have to be naked. They've just got to be putting their clothes on. I just like the idea of people scurrying to get their clothes on in the middle of a war situation. I think it's a good comedy image.
What I would love to see is a resolution for Goneril and Regan. And potentially...
Just disappear. They've just run away.
Yeah, Goneril goes to Cornwall with her spouse to fortify it, presumably. Regan just always she doubles down on her denial that she was ever involved in any of the things that we've clearly seen her be involved in. There's no realization that they've lost. There's no realization of any kind. And because their motivations are so clearly set up at the beginning, and their inner workings are so clearly shown to us throughout, that the lack of a resolution, even a curses foiled again, feels lacking.
I would have got away with it if it wasn't for that pesky Galleon King. Okay, so final moments. What's your one-line pitch? Do you have a one-line pitch? What would you put on the poster? What would you put in the movie trailer that I might edit together at the end of this to close the show? I've got a not very good one. Lear today, Goneril tomorrow.
Gosh.
You can't slap people on Zoom, and right now my regrets are real.
Sorry, I couldn't resist that. Any movie trailer thoughts? Any one-line pitches? How would you sell this show?
Well, we open on a long shot of a desolate seashore, and in the distance we have two figures staggering arm in arm along the shore towards camera, and we have a voiceover, and I'm honestly not sure what speech I would pick for the voiceover. Perhaps the the first scene where Lear sets up Lear proposes to hear his daughters speak, and the daughters profess their love, and yeah, that's the opening of the trailer. I'm not sure how it goes on.
I'm thinking jump cutting between lots of things, like just random lines. Presumptuous King of Gauls, how darest thou presume to enter on our British shore? Cut to thing. Cut
to fire the bacon. Cut to half naked people running back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. All the
Cut
action,
to
all the action,
Mumford.
thunder and lightning, and the messenger running off. People threatening people with knives, bits of
Ooh.
Reagan's speech.
Or your trailer could just be the messenger. Your trailer could just be like the messenger with the murdery letters, seeing these two helpless old people, and just like have some of his lines in voiceover, and have like moral dilemma, dun dun dun, because that could sell it.
Yeah. I've got a couple of others, from modern film. Well, I say modern, film taglines. So this is one variation. King Lear, one man's struggle to take it easy.
Just when you thought it was safe to go back to France.
Oh, stand thou up. It is my part to kneel. Let me pray too that never prayed before. I'm just literally just going through it. There's so much perfectly quotable material, isn't it, in here?
There is, and we really should mention this. There are lots of places where you could really hit an audience in the feels.
Yeah, this is solid dramatic dialogue. It is telling a story. It is giving characters journey. It is doing an awful lot of a job of work, and that's. It's just there's so many moments, there's so many characters. We don't have enough time. Sadly, we do not have enough time. We have run out of time. So all that remains is to thank all these wonderful contributors, you for listening, and get to us your thoughts. Do you want us to be asking different questions about these plays? Do you want what specific plays for us to be looking at? We tend to be doing things that we've done second looks of, so that you can go and watch a reasonably representative idea of what the play looks like. But if you have requests, get them to us. Any thoughts, answers on a postcard, admin@beyondshakespeare.org, or you can find us on most social media at Beyond Shakes. And of course, you can always give something to us. You can become a patron. You get all sorts of exciting things on Patreon. But also, you can donate to this play or to other plays. Links are all in the show notes. Next time, when we will return with the true tragedy of Richard III. And we are tinkering with the format. We are going to be recording this with a live audience. You won't be able to hear them, but there will be a live audience. We'll be doing it on Zoom, and we will have a special guest who we are going to try and persuade that our production is the best. And we'll also ask what the audience on chat think as we go along. So we're going to try and make this a bit more dynamic and adversarial, and I will win. By hook or by crook, I will. Or not. I don't really mind. So, yes, any thoughts, send them in. Otherwise, all that remains is to thank Liza, thank Alexandra, thank Sarah for Cocktail Minute. And it's goodbye from them, and it's goodbye from me, Robert. Goodbye.